Marianne Williamson tells an endearing story of a mother who overheard her young daughter talking to her newborn baby sister. In a whisper, the older girl leaned over the crib and asked her sister, "Can you please remind me about God? I'm starting to forget." As adults, this state of amnesia is our most pressing dilemma. And in a way, the whole focus of our course really amounts to helping us answer that young girl's inquiry. Welcome, fellow traveler, to the Wild Garden of Enlightenment Course on Awakening. My name is Tobin Blake, and I will be your guide as today we explore the nature of what is commonly referred to as the ego. Now, you have likely heard this term used many times before, whether from spirituality teachers or psychologists maybe, and there's a good reason why the ego is such a popular topic of conversation amongst us. If you take a moment to consider what we call the ego's opposite, awareness, or let's say presence, you may catch a glimpse of just why the ego is so commonly studied in spirituality circles. So let's look at it this way. The ego is something so pervasive in our lives that most of us are not even aware that it is there. And that's the real problem. The ego runs almost like a background program. If you consider your computer, whether it's a Windows system or a Mac, and also on your phone, Android systems, and so on and so forth, this program operates the entire system of your phone and your computer, and you never think too much about it. Well, the ego could be thought of as an operating system for our entire lives. And we're never aware of what's really going on behind the scenes there. We're not aware of all the code, in other words, in the background of what the ego is that causes it to operate. And as a result, we go through our lives living really rather carelessly, blindly. Now, the ego's opposite is what we call awareness or presence. Both of these are really the same. We sort of experience them a little bit differently as human beings, perhaps. Awareness is always there, but the problem is we're not aware of awareness. Ironically, very much like we are unaware of the ego's program, we're unaware of the background state that we are awareness only, and that all things share in that exact same awareness. I'm not going to dive too deeply into this. I've addressed awareness before, and we'll address it again because it too is important. But the thing with awareness is it's more difficult to explain in linear terms. It's much more effective to simply experience awareness. Now, the topic of understanding just what the ego is a little bit more concrete and perhaps easier for us to understand. And also, the ego is the interference with awareness. So we may not be able to pinpoint exactly what we mean by awareness, or awareness being aware of itself, or presence. That can be felt. And all we need to do is establish the conditions for that to naturally manifest. That is where topics about the ego really come into play. We need to become aware of what's going on behind the scenes, what is interfering with awareness being aware of itself in our own experience. With that in mind, I invite you to sit back. If you are in a position that you are able to, close your eyes if you like, or at least get into a relaxed inward position and just listen to the following with an open mind and try to take in what this all means and how it applies to your life right now. Since early childhood, you have probably spent a significant portion of your life learning new things about yourself, your family, and relationships, so-called facts, skills of many types, customs, beliefs, and rules of proper conduct, values, and on the list goes. In fact, you have gone so deeply into this mode of acquiring new information and skills, it may be difficult for you to realize that discovering your true self is not a process of adding more knowledge, but of letting all this extra baggage go. Consider a newborn baby. Infants and very young children present the human being in its purest form. Perhaps not perfect like an enlightened being, but as close as most of us ever get. Babies don't know anything. They don't even know their own name, nor what a name is. At birth, they have no idea where they came from, what they are, nor do they have any fixed ideas about the world at all. You and I were both just this way the day we were born. Like all babies and young kids, we had no sense of future or of past, nor any real likes or dislikes, prejudices, or notions of good versus evil. Infants are simple and perfectly honest. If they experience something pleasant, they may smile and giggle. If it is unpleasant, they often cry. There is no fakeness present, no masks, no screen, no judgment. When we are young, we exist as pure consciousness, or something very close to it. But as we develop, we begin adding stuff onto this pure self, and bit by bit, it covers over our essence. See how once we learn our name, we are no longer just pure awareness? Instead, we begin to think of ourselves as the label our parents had printed on our birth certificate. By and by, we go along with this new sense of identity, and we become accustomed to life within a physical body and the sensations it transmits to our awareness. This is the fundamental human concept, which serves as the foundation for the development of what is now routinely called the ego. The Yaqui Indian sorcerer known as Don Juan Matus reportedly told his apprentice Carlos Castaneda, an anthropologist and famous spirituality author from the 1960s, that the quote-unquote normal way of perceiving the human world is not innate, but the result of training and what he called habituation. Don Juan maintained that ancient sorcerers had observed that children's assemblage points were not fixed, but rather constantly in flux. He said that adults, by comparison, had assemblage points that were rigidly set in only one position, which produced a stable view of the human world as we know it. The assemblage point and its specific position could be likened to a television set to a particular station and television show. In this case, we might say that the station we are set to is the Earth channel, and the show is the human experience. So what we perceive and take for granted to be baseline reality is merely our peculiar way of decoding that reality, which bears little, if any, resemblance to what the universe actually is. In Castaneda's book, The Art of Dreaming, Don Juan further elaborates, since we are drafted into that system by being born into it, from the moment of our birth, we imperatively strive to adjust our perceiving to conform to the demands of this system, a system that rules us for life. Essentially, what this means is, as children, we have no set focus. That is, we are not tightly aligned with any one station. When we are very young, we may perhaps see the world as a peculiar dream within the mind, which is much more in line with the way mystics report it to be. We drift in and out of connection with it, but even while awake, like a dream, nothing appears to us as stable, at least not in the way adults see it. The process of indoctrination, which extends into adolescence and beyond, gradually results in us becoming so personally identified with the overwhelming sights, sounds, and propaganda of the world, we completely lose touch with our original, boundless identity. The self-concept has now effectively covered it over and replaced it within our awareness. Marianne Williamson tells an endearing story of a mother who overheard her young daughter talking to her newborn baby sister. In a whisper, the older girl leaned over the crib and asked her sister, "Can you please remind me about God? I'm starting to forget." As adults, this state of amnesia is our most pressing dilemma, and in a way, the whole focus of our course really amounts to helping us answer that young girl's inquiry. Once our natural connection to God starts to fade from awareness, the indoctrination process evolves as we take on still more notions of what our identity must be, diving ever deeper into our amnesic cocoon. For instance, we gradually take on the group identity of our particular nationality and culture, and eventually our career. We learn that we are American, Asian, Mexican, black, white, or whatever, as well as how we should feel about that association, and how we should act and think in accordance to this central role. The same goes for our particular career. A scientist, a cop, social worker, and a coal miner may all have very different worldviews and values, but of course they inevitably share certain broader overlaps in their programming too. Yet another central dimension to the self-concept involves our roles in relation to other people. We are a brother, a sister, a son, a daughter, a friend, a husband, or a wife. And each of these roles carries its own set of guidelines, expectations, and many deep feelings that shape and define our lives. There are plenty of subcategories that serve to further divide and distinguish us as individuals. For instance, we may learn that we are a good brother or a particularly poor friend. We may come to think of ourselves as intelligent or perhaps quite dim-witted, entertaining or dull, empathetic or cold, brilliantly successful or irresponsible failures at life, love, empathy, and other pressing matters of societal measure. This, my friends, is our personality. Essentially, the personality and these concepts that are all connected to it constitute what the essential ego really is. Now consider, on top of all this, each of us harbors many deep, unhealed wounds, some of which we are aware, most of which we are not, incurred from traumas large and small, inflicted upon us over our present lifetime and perhaps many others. There is a rage seated there within the ego, a sense of seething injustice, along with guilt and shame for our own mistakes, cruelty and pettiness, as was discussed in our last Dharma, Lessons of Mara. Above all, the severance from our conscious connection to our true nature produces the most profound agony of all, as our soul ceaselessly longs to know itself and return to the bliss of union and the interior domain of peace. We end up with such a complex mix of opinions, biases, and wild emotions, values, likes and dislikes of every sort, and repressed, unhealed damage. Virtually any random thing, event, offhand comment, or personality that doesn't jibe with our particular point of view can set us off. In all this, my dear fellow traveler, spells big trouble for us. It leaves us in an extreme, although completely imagined, vulnerable position. For we have learned to take this great big wobbly mess as our own self, which we must defend at all costs, because it's vulnerable. Anyone who happens to hold a different viewpoint, harbors opinions unlike our own, or acts and thinks in ways that violate our sense of morals is essentially taken as an enemy. Even though we rarely recognize it, this defensive posturing causes us to feel depressed, anxious, lonely, deprived, never completely satisfied with ourselves, our lives, at peace in our relationships, and in touch with the deep tranquility we once knew as our very being and long to know again. Collectively, our conditioned state has resulted in the ruin of countless relationships, suicides, psychological devastation, horrible levels of cruelty, assaults, and even mass murders and senseless wars. Millions have been killed, and countless more tortured. It is no exaggeration to say that this situation is humanity's most serious dilemma. That's pretty heavy, but now let me make clear. As ugly as this sounds, our goal here is not to attack the ego, but simply to identify its processes, as well as its effects on our own personal peace. We must do this both individually and as a species. The ego is not fought against during this process. Rather, once it is seen for what it is, we recognize that it is merely a system of belief and not our real or literal identity at all. There is something else there with us, and our goal then becomes discovering just what that something else might be and allowing it to manifest. There is another way of experiencing ourselves, our life, and also the world. In the end, the ego is not destroyed, but quietly transcended. This is why it is essential we understand the conditioning process as it is. We must have courage as we turn and face this, because to challenge our conditioning goes against the thinking of the entire world, along with our own cherished self-concept. Some have said this very much feels like dying. Yet while this topic may be uncomfortable, nothing could be more deleterious than ignoring a disease so debilitating it has resulted in the chaos of the world in which we live. Collectively, we have taken this conditioning process that we go through and teach our young totally for granted to such a degree few of us ever identify it for what it is, much less stop to question what's really going on here. The conditioning of our species is a major force of nature, so much so that it is practically invisible to us. Ironically, as mentioned earlier, the ego's opposite, awareness, also remains nearly invisible to us, while we are engaged in the unconscious programming of life as an ego. As for egoic conditioning, we don't even see it happening. In the same way, fish never question the nature of the sea they inhabit. The water is their entire universe, for they are immersed in it from birth till death. Don Juan's comment rings a bell here, when he pointed out that from the time we are born, we strive to adjust our perceiving to conform to the demands of this system. This is exactly right. and it is an insight of sweeping importance if we hope to survive as a species, or even enjoy a little genuine peace individually. The initiation of our youth into the ego-body illusion represents a powerful current, impossible for any of us to fully swim against. We are compelled to conform to our species' way of seeing and understanding the world, and life more broadly, which includes all the tremendous perceptual, mechanistic, and mental limitations unique to our own kind. This is why I said before that awakening is more a process of dropping stuff than adding on. Of course, there is some seeming contradiction here, in that we do need to learn some new ideas, such as the topic today presents. Yet, these new perspectives and skills are unique in that they are temporary from their very inception, rather than ends in themselves. After awareness of awareness has been restored, we no longer need any real theory to guide us. Everyone has made an ego for themselves, and everyone defends what he believes his life to be. It is only this that makes awakening seem difficult. We fight the urge to awaken and be free every day, indeed every instant of every day, by ferociously clinging to and defending our particular sense of self-identity. And it really is just that simple. It is this cycle, then, we must disrupt, and it starts when we first become aware of what is happening. We must become conscious, impartial observers of the ego's dedication to judgment, attack, defensiveness, and division, and monitor its results on our lives, the lives of those we love, and in fact, anyone or circumstance we happen to encounter. For the next few days, practice observing the conditioning that your own ego leads you to. Practice watching for the signs of judgment, that closing down, and pay particular attention to what it is you are reacting to, and also how that feels internally. This becoming conscious process is the very first step we need to take in learning to let it go. The next step, of course, is to learn to experience the opposite, presence. Before we wrap up, if today's reflection resonated with you, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing the course with others. It's a simple way to keep this work free and accessible, while helping these teachings find those who need them most. Thank you for being a part of this growth. Now, let's close out. Next time on the Wild Garden of Enlightenment, we're going to get back into the nature of awareness and learning what that means in comparison to all this that we've discussed today. Until then, vaya con Dios, step by step, with presence, with awareness, and with love. Thank you for joining me.